I was a completely different person. I went through multiple transformations over that period, and I needed to do something different either for myself or the company. And I got really lucky that they let me do that. I really need novelty in my work to keep me going. I learned so much from listening to, the more experienced people like our CEO. I went into college thinking that I wanted to be a physicist.
Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. #Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. And of course, now and always, keep hustling. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Peter Bonney. Peter, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, great being here, Aaron. Thanks.
We had a little rescheduling issue on my end, but I appreciate you scheduling with me. And more importantly, it's always nice to speak to someone else who has a great appreciation and affinity for the Upper East Side of Manhattan. If you're listening and that offends you, this is not the podcast for you. So I apologize. It really is a concrete jungle, and I grew up with pigeons as pets. So anyone who appreciates pigeons the way I do, I'm glad to have you on.
That's great being here. Yeah, no, it's New York is really, it gets in your blood or it doesn't.
Well, you mean to say is you either can hack it or you can't hack it. I got it. I understand. I totally get it.
Yeah.
I want to jump right into something.
Sure.
Usually we go way back, but I kind of want to, because your story is so fascinating to me and the way that the hustle kind of evolves. We were talking before we went live. You started your career in the world of hedge funds.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of people, I want to ask you two questions about that. First of all, is it as crazy as everyone says, and what made you want to do it? And I know that those hours as it relates to the hustle and to keep hustling is important. And the second part of that, which I can repeat if you need afterwards, is most people, I feel like when they are in such an intense work environment, when they start their careers, feel, some people call it burnout, that the foot has to come off the gas. Jumping into a new venture, entrepreneurship, founder, CEO, whatever you want to say, not foot off the gas hustle type thing, not investing in startups.
Right.
You know what I mean? Being in it, the guy. And so I kind of would love to get into your mindset of how you got into that to start a career, what it was like at the end. Those careers are not at that pace, not 50 years. And then kind of how things evolved in your own hustle and your own development.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So I guess I'll try to draw, kind of pull on a couple threads and we'll see where it goes. So look, the first thing is that I got into finance and investment management completely by accident. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life when I was in my early 20s. And actually back then I thought what I wanted to do was tech. But for whatever reason, coming out of college, I interviewed with some software companies, and I guess I wasn't quite techie enough at the time, or didn't really know how to interview or something. So I didn't actually land any jobs at tech companies. Like I interviewed at Microsoft, I interviewed at Intel, interviewed at like some, I forget some of the startups of the day. I'm going to date myself. That was I was coming out of college the summer of '99. So some of the early .coms, and I didn't land anywhere. So here I was an Ivy League kid. And if you're an Ivy League, you're an Ivy League grad, and you've got a quantitative background, and you can't, for whatever reason, get a job in tech, like, Wall Street and consulting firms, like they're happy to have you. So, I started out working at a consulting firm for a couple of years. And then when a friend of mine who was working on this trading desk, called me and said, "Hey, we're looking for an analyst." He liked his job. He was interested in it. I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And, at the time I figured like, whatever, I'll try this for a couple of years, see what it's like. I'll make some money. I hadn't really made much money at that point. Had student loans, like, it was going to be good in the short term, and, I'll try something different, and then we'll go from there. ended up, just kind of really, I think, being like the right fit for my personality, my skills, the people I was working with. I stayed there for 13 years.
And you didn't burn out.
I burned out multiple times.
So what is that like? I like that. By the way, most people don't admit that. Most people say, I'm going to last like 13 years, is a long time in that type of an environment. And that's what I was getting at is how do you, obviously careers evolve.
Yeah.
And so, you kind of never left that real hustle, that real, some people call it grind, I call it hustle, but that real hustle of the intensity of the work environment.
Yeah.
So yes, you left that and became an entrepreneur, but it's not like after 5 years you said, I'm going to go, serve cocktails out of a tiki hut,
Right.
or, do something less intense.
Yeah.
So do you think that's a personality thing? Do you think that you develop that in the trenches there?
Well, I got lucky that I was at a company where people stayed there a long time. We had, long-term relationships. Like I'm still friends with the people that are still there. It's turned into a family office. There was a 20th anniversary party for the company last year, and I went. It was just like we've got like that kind of relationship. Still got lunch with all my old buddies that I used to work with. And so like when you're in that kind of environment, there was like a real long-term investment in people. And so, I was like 24 years old, something like that. And when I left, I was almost 40. And so, like I was a completely different person. I went through multiple transformations over that period. And so I was lucky to be at a place where, they allowed me to have those transformations. They encouraged me to have those transformations. And it was necessary because like, I think I didn't leave the firm, but there were multiple times where I sort of reached the end of what I was doing. Like I wasn't going to be able to keep doing what I was doing anymore, either because, you want to call it burnout, or just I'd reached the end of my interest in what I was doing. Or, just the opportunity wasn't the same anymore for what I was focusing on. And I needed to do something different either for myself or the company. And I got really lucky that they let me do that. Let me give you a couple examples. When I started there, I was the junior analyst I was the most junior person on the desk. I was supporting somebody else, not doing my own investment ideas. I was just, executing his ideas and working with him. And that was really interesting for a while. That was great. Right. But after a few years of that, like, that wasn't interesting anymore. That wasn't exciting. Like I needed different challenges. And, if I was in a different place, I might have had to just leave to go find those different challenges. I was able there to say, you know what, look, I need my own portfolio. I have some ideas, like give me some capital to invest in those ideas. And they did. And so, like that then was enough to keep me going for a few more years.
I hear that.
Okay.
But I also hear that you had to have the vision to evolve.
True.
In that, you jokingly, you laughed when you said I burned out multiple times, which we all say. But yet there's something inside.
Yeah.
In what I'll call the inner hustler, which is I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
But I don't want to jump.
Yes.
I want to pivot, and I want to. And by the way, if they would have said no, maybe, or they would have, or that wouldn't have worked out. Sure. Obviously, the pivot would have been different. But how many people are in that position and don't take that?
Yeah.
And are so close to the opportunity to manage their own portfolio, or they have their own ideas, but they just feel like the cogs in the wheel are taking them in one place. And a lot on this podcast we talk about reinventing the hustle, or evolving the hustle, or redefining someone's hustle. So you weren't really there for 13 years in the same chair, in the same seat. And it wasn't even like a traditional progression up a ladder. At a certain point, you switched ladders.
Yeah.
But that was only because in yourself you said,
yeah, this
is what I got to do. And I have the confidence that they're going to kind of see that in me.
Yeah. And look, the other thing is that I think I was in a very entrepreneurial environment. At the time, this was when I started there was early 2000s. This was kind of like the heyday for hedge funds. And when I got there, it was a brand new shop. Like I was there for like the actual launch of it. Like we were a trading desk at Deutsche Bank. And then like, look, I was, like I said, I was the junior guy on the desk. Not like this was my idea, but I got there and they were like, hey, we're going to, spin this off into our own thing. Like we're going to create our own fund.
Like, that's a terrible idea. Deutsche Bank is a big bank. What are we doing? That's a terrible
No,
idea.
I was thrilled. I was excited. Like I think maybe this is the thing. Like I've always been drawn to that kind of adventure. You know what I mean? Like I like doing new things. I think I get bored pretty easily. And I like even though I'm look, if you and I met on the street, you'd think like, oh, that's a pretty mild mannered guy. And I am, but like I really need novelty in my work to keep me going. I like really, really crave like challenges. I crave adventure in the workplace. And so I don't think I would have lasted if we had stayed at Deutsche Bank. I would have left. It was just not that kind of big company life is not for me. But it also wasn't for the people I was working with, which was great. It was like a real alignment there.
So you saw that alignment, and that's kind of maybe that's also maybe there's a lesson for business leaders in that if you find those that align with your views and with your drive and with your personality and wanted to grow with you, and they stay with you, the Peters of the world stay with you when you take your leap. Then when Peter comes to you a number of years later and says, "This is where I feel my next evolution is," maybe that's what gave them the audacity. Or I'm saying, it's not traditional. It's not traditional to have someone come and say, "Hey, not I want to be a lead analyst, but I want my own. I have some of my own ideas. Some of them were probably kind of ingrained in you from the firm or from those mentors, but
Sure.
yet I kind of want to build my own nest and develop my own wings and fly my own way."
Yeah.
And I think that probably made them some money in the short and long term. Certainly in the long term, probably.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't have happened if they didn't allow it. So I think that's also probably a nod to mentorship.
Yeah. Look, you're getting something interesting, which is like, I think when people talk about entrepreneurship, they draw sort of like a line between, you're either working for somebody else or you're working for yourself. Right. And I mean, I've done both. I've worked. I'm now, starting my own. I am truly a founder now and have been for a while. But before that, I would say like I was somewhere along a spectrum, right, where it's not like I was working for the man, so to speak, and I just had no purpose or no autonomy. I was working for people who really valued that kind of initiative. They really valued people who would want to build their own business, because at the end of the day, right, like you're working for a hedge fund, it's very black and white, right? Like you're making money or you're not. Like they're what they're hoping to get out of their people is very, very clear.
Right.
So, if they think you can make money, they're like, and they believe in it, like, hey, go to town, like, do it. And so,
God forbid you lose us money, you're gone. We delete you from our contacts.
That's the trade, right? That's the deal you make. But like, so when you're in that kind of environment, like, it was very encouraging. Now, I don't think every hedge fund is that way. Some of them are definitely, especially these days, they're much more institutionalized, I guess. But at the time, like when I started, it was like, I think we're maybe 12, 13 people. And then we got as big as 130. So, it became a different kind of firm. But for most of its life, it was very much like hey, like we're into people trying stuff. Like you've got ideas, you've got initiative, like you can make it your own. And so for young people starting out, like if you're not sure what's going to happen, you need something a little bit, between the sort of certainty of a big company job or like the, operating without a net of starting your own business. There are companies out there where you can kind of do it in between. Like you just got to find them.
I don't get political on this show, on this podcast.
But you're about to.
No. The point I'm making, the questions I'm about to ask are no way politically driven, but I'm listening to your story, and there's a few things I feel like young people need to know about this, and this might get controversial, but that's okay. The first is, and I wanted to ask this, I'll start with the second one first. The excitement, 13 people, breaking off from Deutsche Bank,
Mhm.
130 people, learning the ropes.
Mhm.
That stimulates your own ideas,
Yep.
own portfolio, so on and so forth.
Yep.
Is there any chance that that happens if you were in a remote work environment?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. The answer is 100% no. Absolutely not. No, I look, I'm there's a lot that I like about remote work, especially now that I'm a dad and I've got a family and I get to be around for the small things that happen in life. But yeah, if I had been working this way back then, no way. No way.
So what does that mean for the energy going forward of the workforce? Meaning,
Yeah.
it's very easy for you and I to say that now, right? I also was privileged to be trained in a business,
Yeah.
answering the phones, doing all that, and
Mhm.
then now, I have 5 children, and I like being
Yep.
home, and I like that flexibility, and I like doing
Yeah.
that. But your story, I don't know why I've never asked that question before.
Yeah.
And we're almost 60 episodes in. It's like I'm just envisioning. They're like, hey, Peter, no, you just got here, but guess what? We're breaking out and we're going to do our own thing. And then like, okay,
Yeah.
great. I'm along for the ride. And
Yeah.
then your whole thing evolves from that.
Yeah.
And if I'm imagining these like huddles, he's walking over to the desks, those things that I feel like, you know, I wish there was a way that we could continue that. And I think that companies
Yeah.
are getting back to that because they realize that it's very hard to be creative
Yeah.
looking at your 4 walls.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. Like when we were like physically structured as like a trading desk. Like, different funds operate in different ways in their physical space. Like everyone sat on an open floor. So it was that, even if it wasn't kind of like the, super, super loud phone throwing, screaming kind of trading environment, it was an open trading desk. And so I heard everything that was happening, right? Here I am, 23, 24, don't know anything about investment management, right? Like I've got, some brain power, some math skills, some ideas, but I don't know jack. I learned so much from watching, listening to, the more experienced people like our CEO, my boss, uh, doing trades, right? Coming up with ideas, talking about ideas internally, just out in the open, like turning around, having a conversation, and then executing them. Sometimes having fights with people. Sometimes like pretending to be mad at somebody. Sometimes being mad, but being like lowering the energy. Like if all I got was the structured meeting of like, okay, we're going to get on a Zoom call now, and then the Zoom call's over, and I didn't see everything that was happening before and after, yeah, I would have missed all of that subtlety. Like it's like all of the conversation between the principals, like, the 5 minutes before they get on the call about like how are they going to strategize on this call, what are they trying to find out, and like what roles people are going to play, like who's going to be the bad cop, who's going to be the good cop, like all of this stuff. Um, then listening to the call and being able to literally listen in. Like we had trading phones, right?
Right. And I think it's also like the non-invasive eavesdropping in a good way, meaning like
Totally.
forgetting about the fact that the trading floor is open, but it's also
Yep.
just like if you're in the office and 2 people are like your boss or your manager is talking to their boss, if it's on a Zoom call, they're not letting you into the call. You don't even know that you don't even know the call exists right now.
Yes.
But yet if it's in the office next to you, you have to be walking by with your coffee and they're like, hey, Peter, or you could just listen in. Hey guys, like, and gals, you mind if I listen in? Like that doesn't
Yep.
happen. And I'm just, I don't know why it just hit me in your story that like,
Yep.
so much of that evolution happens from that interpersonal relationship. And it's not, by the way, I also think, because this has come up on the podcast in the past, that, and it's obviously it's a way that some people operate. It's not the once a month coffee with your mentor,
No.
because that's also has a little bit too much
Yes.
formality in it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's that, like some of the best conversations I had with my father,
Yeah.
he should rest in peace in business, was like when we had a long road trip and got stuck in traffic or got delayed in the airport and like didn't have an agenda. When you go into a meeting, you have 15 minutes, you want to prepare. Yeah, you see that real world experience and you're like prepping for the call, but you're not like hearing the stories from 40 years ago in an airport. So
Have you ever heard Seinfeld's bit about quality time versus garbage time?
No, but I feel like I'd love it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I
So,
wasn't. This is going to sound terrible as a guy
yeah,
who loves New York.
yeah.
We weren't big Seinfeld people in our house. I know
That's
it's
fine.
terrible.
I'm not a huge Seinfeld guy
I don't
either.
want to disrespect.
No, it's fine. I can take him or
Yeah, but
leave
you're
him.
not a real New Yorker. That's the
Well, yeah,
problem here.
I grew up outside.
That's
It's fine.
a
I'm allowed. And actually, you know what? I actually can't even remember if this is like a bit from his act or if this was on like, comedians in cars or somewhere else or a talk show. But I heard him talk about this one time. And like, here's the basic gist that like the real people talk about wanting to get quality time, like between, parents and kids or mentors and mentees. But like where the real bonding happens is garbage time. It's the things you didn't plan. It's the crappy stuff you just have to do in life. Like you're out with your dad having to shovel the driveway because, a foot of snow got dumped and like neither one of you's happy about it. But like, you're out there and you're doing it. And like this is where like the bonding happens. And like the same thing when you talked about being in the office and what I learned, I immediately went back. For one of the first things I thought of was back in 2003, as we were, getting out of we're leaving the bank, and like there's so much work that has to happen to kind of like cleave ourselves off. And I remember being in the office like 12:30 at night. It was me, our CEO, and like maybe two other people. Just we were all just there late and like something wasn't working out and it was not fun. Like this was not fun times, but like he came over to my desk and we sat down and like we worked through something together and I was stuck and he helped me. And like the interesting thing about it is like when I think what I got out of that, I don't even remember what it was. I cannot remember what it was. What I got out of that night, which I will never forget, is I realized here's this guy, here's the CEO. He is earning 8 figures a year already, right? He's leaving that to like launch this new thing. His work ethic is such that he is going to sit down with me and we're going to work through this thing until it's right. And he's not leaving until it's done.
And this will mean nothing to his financial life. Nothing.
Nothing.
This one, micro moment will mean nothing.
Nothing. Exactly. And like that, that was like, I learned so much about like, oh, wow, this is the intensity of the work ethic that I've got to bring to stuff.
And that's what inspired your hustle ultimately, right?
Like being around that environment. Totally. Yeah.
Wow. That was a total sidebar, but I'm so happy we did that. Wow. Time is flying, but I got two more questions for you. This is going to be fun. We're going to do this. The other question, which may be a loaded one too, and we can, leave it, make it shorter, is you also said that you were an Ivy League grad who didn't get your first choice of a job.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2024.
Yeah.
This episode might air in the beginning of 2025, but we're at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025. What do you say about how that experience, the traditional Ivy League education, impacted? And I would ask you to leave the loans aside just for a minute.
Sure.
Meaning, obviously, the debt that comes with traditional education is something that most people have to deal with, but the people who have a positive experience and it helps their career, usually 20 years later, 25 years later, that's not part of the equation any longer.
Yeah, no, totally. Like I don't think about the loans anymore. Like, so actually, look, I got to give a little bit of background there because, it's, you probably got a picture. It's like Ivy League grad, went to a consulting firm, then Wall Street after college, that calls to mind a certain kind of background, a certain kind of experience. I grew up in a real blue collar town. My parents both went to trade schools. And the houses on my street, this was totally normal to me until I got to college. But I lived on the kind of street where like people were running businesses out of their garage. Like there were at least 2 or 3 people I can think of on the street who were like repairing cars out of their garage. And that was what
hustle.
Yeah, it was hustle. Like my dad, he worked in retail for most of his career, but he always had side hustles. Like the concept of a side hustle, when I first heard of it, I was like, oh, well, yeah, of course. Like this is what
people do. That's called a side hustle. That's just a weekend. It's like,
that was just
when everybody did that on weekends.
Exactly. That was like, my dad would like, literally, he'd go to auctions, he'd go to flea markets, he would find stuff, that like he thought was like undervalued. He'd like polish it up, repackage it, whatever, and then he'd go to different auctions. It's like he knew the auctions. Like if I buy this thing here, I can sell it for more at this other auction. If I buy it at this flea market, I know this other flea market, has better
I can
prices.
flip it. And
Yeah, he was flipping. Exactly. He was flipping before that was kind of like in the consciousness. And like as you said, this was just the weekend, right? This is just how I grew up. And for me, I didn't grow up expecting to go to Harvard, expecting to apply to an Ivy League school. I didn't apply to any other Ivy League schools except Harvard. I don't know why I applied to Harvard. I certainly didn't expect to get in. And
yikes.
yeah,
That must have been a shocker.
well, yeah, well, that was the thing, right? Like, 'cause it's like, I'm saying this because I came at it from a different perspective of like, oh, was it worth it? Like what was the experience like? Blah, blah, blah. Like for me, it was like, oh, I got in. There were other things that I thought I wanted to do with my life, but it's like when I got the acceptance packet, it's like, well, you don't turn this down, right? Like this is my golden ticket. I'm not going to miss it, right? So it's just a slightly different twist on that.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that nowadays, unfortunately, people don't view it that way.
Mm,
Right? I mean, I think that it's, I don't need that, or people drop out, or what's the value? My father, he should rest in peace, always said he was the first in his family to go to college. We all went to college, and for nothing else, the experience. And it doesn't have to happen at Harvard. But
yeah,
the
sure.
traditional, I believe, and my mother dislikes when I say this because she's a real intellectually, she's much more intellectual than I am. And I pride myself on actually being, pretty with it and knowledgeable. That it's just the actual factual day-to-day education you get in college is meaningless compared to the experiences that you can have in an environment like that, and the mentors you can meet, and the friends you can make, and the maturity that can happen, which then has a unquantifiable impact on your career. So I don't know. I just wanted to ask you about that, but
yeah,
but I appreciate that.
Look, I agree with that. That I agree with. Like people ask, from time to time will ask like, oh, what did you learn in college and how does it apply to what you do? And the answer is it doesn't, right? Like there's next to nothing I learned in college that I actually, specific piece of knowledge that I actually use. But, for me, going from being in this kind of blue collar town to being surrounded by all these high achievers, all these super, super smart people, I went into college thinking that I wanted to be a physicist. Okay. And then freshman year of college, I met the people who were actually going to be physicists, right? The future Nobel Prize candidates, right? And I said, oh, I am not one of them, but I am very lucky to be around them,
And you're like, and I am, it has been made clear to me that I'm not one of them.
Exactly. Like I sort of started to understand like where I think I'm a smart guy, but like I started to understand where I was on that hierarchy. Anyway, so like I'm gonna mention one other thing. My brother is a high school dropout. And he's been very successful in his life. And he followed a totally different path. He had a number of challenges that I didn't face, and I got real lucky. We're both smart guys, both quantitative. He ended up getting his GED. He sold cars for a while. He was successful at that. He joined the Navy, and because he was smart, he tested into this elite program in cryptography, and ended up forging a career as an engineer. He now works for Boeing, through a completely different path. He never went to college. He got training in the Navy, and so to your point, like there's a whole bunch of different paths, right? Like you don't have to go to Harvard or even go to a college at all to get on a path that is going to maximize your capabilities. But you need to get on some kind of path that's going to maximize your capabilities. It's really hard to do.
And you need to stay on it. So many people give up too early. And that's what Keep Hustling is about. It's about saying, this is the path. This is what I think. That doesn't mean you can't detour, but it's saying things get a little bit tough and you just jump ship and say, that's it. I don't, that's not something that I buy into.
Yeah, I agree. There's always.
I want to ask you before we run out of time. You're now in the RFP business.
Yes.
And I had this thing when I was looking through your bio and through your story. Like, should people be evolving their personal RFP? Should people be analyzing. One of the things that this podcast is about is just trying to get people, myself included, to think about their hustle, to think about where they were, where they are, and where they want to be.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that there could be something there with RFPs, and I didn't want to let the episode go by without asking about your business and kind of,
that's really
dropping the Keep Hustling in there.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a good segue. That's interesting. Yes, I think, that's, wow. You've got me thinking about something I haven't really thought about, but
it's a $1 billion idea. Here you go. You heard it here first.
Like, when I think about myself, one thing I do, like, everyone has a different model of themselves and how they think about their lives. I'll be honest, I do think about, like, my own bio, right? And if I was writing my bio of myself, what would it say, right? If I was writing, I don't keep my resume up to date, like, I'm not applying for jobs, but, like, what is going to be on my resume? What is I guess I kind of do this with my LinkedIn profile. What's on my LinkedIn profile? Like, what am I bringing to the table? How do I describe myself? What skills do I have? And it's actually it's actually even a little, the more I'm thinking about your question, the more profound it is, because the things I've had to evolve, kind of moving from, like, being a trader on Wall Street, where, like, I had to do a lot of stuff and I had to take a lot of initiative, but, like, I didn't have to sell. I didn't have to run the business. I just had to make money. Right. Now, running a software company, like, I need to sell, I need to be able to hire, I need to market, and now I'm doing this the second time. Like, there's, I can see all the ways I did it wrong the first time. I'm sure I'm still doing it wrong in different ways now, but, like, there are all these gaps that I've had to identify in myself. And it is kind of like you're completing this RFP where, it's like, in order for me to succeed in life, succeed in not just life, succeed in the arena I've chosen. I don't want to say it's all about life. You can succeed in a lot of different ways, but the arena I've chosen for me to succeed, there are the strengths I have, and then there are the weaknesses, and it's all out there on the list. Like, if I'm not good at sales, that's going to come through in my business success or lack thereof. And so I got to fill that gap, and I got to come up with a compelling story for myself on sales. Yeah, you're right. That is actually kind of like, it's like God is asking me to complete an RFP and be honest about myself. And he's asking me all the tough questions, and I got to answer them.
I'm glad we're onto something here.
That's interesting.
Okay. I'm glad. This is cool. That's exactly what I was thinking about. That's what Keep Hustling is all about. We ask our guests to leave us with their favorite, and time has flown in this episode more than many others, their favorite all-time or current motivational, inspirational quote and what it means to them and their hustle. So with that, I'll say thank you to you, Peter Bonney. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having the time fly. Thank you for supporting the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. Fail early, fail often. That is number one thing. My favorite, we can talk about other things, but my favorite hobby right now is Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And it is so humbling because no matter how good you think you are, you suck. Like, and you just, every class, it's like, you just go in there and you're going to get beat up. And you've just got to embrace the fact that you're going to fail over and over and over again, and just keep going back and try to get a little better each time and learn from your failure. And I think that's the same lesson that applies to entrepreneurship. Like, it's okay to fail. It's necessary to fail. I shouldn't say no one. It's exceedingly rare that anybody succeeds out of the gate. You've just got to keep at it and keep trying and be willing to fail and face your failures and just keep coming back.
I love that. The perfect way to end. Keep hustling. This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good. And of course, and always, keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. If you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.